This is the 2022 Lexus GX, but don't let that 2022 part fool you. This thing is a relic by every metric, by every measurement. This is an actual dinosaur of a body-on-frame SUV. However, if you said to me, head down to your local Lexus dealer, pick any vehicle you want off the lot and take it home, I would choose the GX. Why? That's what we're gonna find out. Way back in 2010, when I first joined MotorTrend, I went to my first ever SUV of the Year competition, and guess what? The GX was brand new way back when. Now, I didn't really get this vehicle back then. It kind of seemed, even though it was new, ancient. Although, I will say, I know a lot more about off-roading now than I did back then, and I've come to really respect this thing as an off-road vehicle. What is it? A lot of people think it's actually a Toyota 4Runner, but it isn't. One of the reasons it's so wonderful off-road is it's actually based on the Toyota Land Cruiser Prado. Prado's a vehicle we don't get in this market unless you buy a GX, but it's a slightly smaller Land Cruiser. Still 3 rows, still has a V8, it's just smaller in every dimension and the engine's been downsized a little bit, but you get all that wonderful Land Cruiser off-road capability. Now, what does this vehicle compete with? All sorts of SUVs, but primarily I'm gonna say it goes up against that new Land Rover Defender rather well. Then you've got like the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and especially the new Grand Cherokee L, that's the 3-row version. And then just other really capable off-road vehicles, be it a Jeep Wrangler, the new Ford Bronco, or even that Toyota 4Runner. When it comes to design, you cannot talk about modern Lexuses without talking about this massive, crazy looking grille. Some people really like them, some people really don't. I'm one of the really don'ts. It's their design motif, it's their signature design language. It's overwrought, let's be honest. They did a pretty good job here on the GX, but it's a little unnecessary. And remember, it didn't used to look like this. This is relatively new. My biggest problem with it though, when it comes to the GX is because the grille is so big, there's all this unnecessary body stuff down here. And if you really go off-roading, and by the way, people that buy GXs do really go off-roading, you're gonna smash and bash all this stuff down here up. What's the solution? You get a different body kit for it, and people do that. Coming down the side, yes, this looks like a very capable SUV. Guess what? It is. Love the wheels. The tires are actually pretty good. And from this angle, all I'm seeing is like, oh yeah, I can unbolt this, I could pull the running boards off, and I'd have that much more ground clearance, which would be awesome. It's just a classic SUV. Like if I were to zoom in right here and say, hey, that's a Mitsubishi Montero from 20 years ago, nobody would really know the difference. They'd say, well, why does it have Lexus written on the glass? But yeah, I guess I could see how that's a Mitsubishi. Just again, classic SUV design. Same story out back. It just, you know, it's nice and tall, looks like an SUV. Love the trailer hitch sticking out, and it's got a swing open style tailgate, which you just gotta love. But look, are you rushing down and buying a GX because of the way it looks? Well, unless you're absolutely in love with this grille, I'll argue no. I'm inside the Lexus GX, and this is a funny interior because it's a very utilitarian, you know, basic SUV that's pretending to be luxurious. I'll give you some examples. You know, like on the Toyota Prado, that piece of wood ain't there. They shoehorned it in here on the Lexus, but like, that's gotta be the smallest piece of wood in the automotive industry. Why would they bother? Then you have these like nice, high quality soft rubber pieces, which are great on an SUV, maybe not so great on a luxury SUV. You might want that covered with leather. They did cover some parts with leather, like right here in the lower parts of the doors and the seats and everything. But again, I mean, the Toyota-ness shows through, as do a lot of the controls. You know, I recognize some of these buttons, like the window controls, for instance, from the 90s, if not earlier. They are old. And then, you know, like the fonts don't quite match up. These are actually two different fonts, which would send my OCD off a cliff. It's also a lot of hard plastic, like this gigantic cup holder cover. You know, in a car that costs this much with a big Lexus badge, sort of chintzy. Also, it's new for this model year, new infotainment screen. It's better than it was, specifically the mapping, but man, it's just, it still has this touchpad controller, and calling it useless, it's a polite thing to say. And then, there's buttons to control the screen above the touchpad, but there's also some here. And they have different fonts. It's just a mess. Still has a CD player. Cool if you're into CDs. There are some nice SUV things going on though. Nice chunky steering wheel. Shifter's nice and chunky. Plus lots of grab handles. That's key. I got one here. So not only is it good for actually like rocking sideways when you're off-road, but on a long trip, different places to put your arm. It actually is crucial. It's a nice Land Rover attribute that they retain for the GX. Speaking of a long trip, it's fairly cramped in here for how large this vehicle is. Look, it's a cut down LX, it's body on frame. It's not gonna have as much space as a more modern off-roader like that Land Rover Defender, but it's decent enough. Back seat is pretty tight. The third row is incredibly tight. However, should you fold both rows down, there is a lot of room to haul some stuff around. When it comes to performance, I feel it's never really fair to judge a body-on-frame SUV the way you would, say, a passenger car or even a unibody SUV. They're just designed to do different things, like tow and go off-road and all that kind of stuff. That said, under the hood, there is a 4.6-liter naturally aspirated V8. It makes 301 horsepower, 329 pound-feet of torque, which is okay, but a little light by today's standards because of turbocharging and all that, but not bad. But I did say this is a dinosaur, and specifically I was talking about the transmission. It still has Toyota's old 6-speed automatic transmission. Everything else that the GX is going to compete against is going to have an 8-speed auto or greater, so it's really going to suffer when it comes to fuel economy, and we'll get to that. I will say though, that transmission is hooked up to a permanent, full-time, 4-wheel drive system. 4-wheel drive means it has a transfer case, it has low gears, so it can really go off-road, and if that's not enough, it has 5 off-road modes. I've tested them all out, they're all incredibly effective. This can also tow 6,500 pounds, which is really good for an SUV, and that's again another advantage of it being body on frame. The downside to all this, of course, is efficiency, and especially coming from the Prius people, the numbers are pretty bad. 15 miles per gallon around town and rated at only 19 miles per gallon on the highway. Safety. Well, after all these years, nobody has bothered to crash test a Lexus GX. Why not? I'm gonna let you in on a little open secret. Expensive, low-selling vehicles, they just don't get crash tested. That's just how the automotive world works. Well, what about automatic safety features? Well, it has a couple. It has lane departure warning, it has blind spot monitoring, it has adaptive cruise control, but notice it doesn't have lane keeping assist. Just the warning will chime if you're going out of your lane rather than put you back into the lane. Why not? This thing still has hydraulic steering. You gotta have e-pass or electronic power steering before you can get lane keeping. Remember, I said it's a relic. How much? Well, maybe not quite as much as you think. Now, it is still a Lexus. It's got that big badge, so it's not gonna be cheap, but you can get into a GX for $56,500. That's the base price. This one next to me, which is essentially fully loaded, is just under $62,000. If you look at the competition, a Land Rover Defender 110, which is spec'd comparably, base price on that is almost $10,000 more. This actually undercuts both the Jeep Grand Cherokee L and a Ford Bronco that again is spec'd in the same manner. So it is something of a value. Of course, the GX is a much older vehicle than, well, all the competition. If there's one thing I want you to know about the 2022 Lexus GX, it's that it's a great SUV. Yeah, it's not the smartest thing to buy. It's old, it's cramped inside, it doesn't make a ton of power, it's not that much fun to drive, and by 2022 standards, the fuel economy is embarrassing. However, if you're buying an SUV for actual SUV reasons, maybe, just maybe, you should buy an actual SUV. To see vehicle rankings and a complete buyer's guide, please visit motortrend.com/cars.